Boba Fett was Cad Bane's apprentice for a time, and Cad Bane was Jango Fett's, Boba's father. At least that's what the bounty hunting records tell us. But whenever we search through the history of the late Republic, it's hard to find many stories that connect the three, especially after Jango Fett accepted Darth Tyrannus' proposal that his DNA would be used as a template for the clones of the Republic army. The stories of the bounty hunters fade into obscurity. We don't actually hear much from Cad Bane, Jango, or Boba until a few months before the Clone Wars. But there was one time, just a moment shared between father and son, when we learn what Boba Fett actually thought of Cad Bane. Sometime before his famous duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on the rain-swept platforms of Kamino, Jango Fett found himself in a dingy cantina on the inner rim world of Telarath. Like most seedy pubs in the galaxy, this tiny hovel on Telarath housed the same familiar faces: thieves, smugglers, and bounty hunters. In a distant corner of the establishment, leaning over a circular table, a bat-like Chadrafan, a green-skinned Rodian, and a grand bounty hunter waited miserably. As they cycled through some of the worst grog that the bar could offer, they traded complaints about their fourth member, who was annoyingly late. "You'd think someone with his rep could actually show up on," the Gand whined, as his tiny, rodent companion ordered another round. Before the bartender had a chance to nod his head and signal that he'd heard their order, a Mandalorian warrior passed into the bar, covered head to toe in silver Beskar armor. "Jango Fett, it's a real honor," the Rodian piped up, managing to prove just how amateurish the lot of bounty hunters were with a single greeting. As the green-skinned humanoid pointed his hand around the table, introducing the other hunters he had assembled, a child walked out of the bar's shadows and into the buzzing yellow light that filled the booth. "Hello." It was Boba Fett. Jango had taken his son with him on this mission. That wasn't the unusual either. Every time Jango left to hunt another bounty, he couldn't help but feel bad, leaving his son behind in the care of that old, forgetful Kaminoan droid. As soon as Boba was old enough, Jango started to take him along in order to pass on the ancient warrior traditions that had served the Mandalorians for over 5,000 years. But when Boba looked at the sad lot of hunters assembled at this tiny cantina on Telarath, he couldn't help but feel a little bit disappointed. And unlike his old man, he didn't keep his feelings to himself. In fact, he gave him a proper earful on the ride out of the dump. "I don't see why we're doing a job with this crew," Boba Fett said, as his father piloted their Firespray 31 class patrol ship out of the entertainment district, which would later be known as Slave One. They had just left the bar after debriefing the other members of the hunting party of their specific plan. "I haven't even heard any of them," Boba continued, and it's in the next sequence that we're able to find one of the only mentions of Cad Bane during Fett's youth prior to the Battle of Geonosis and the start of the Clone Wars. "Why can't we work with Cad Bane, or Aurra Sing, or Zam Wesell?" And who's who of the greatest bounty hunters in the galaxy. Boba Fett would rather work with any number of them over the strange bat-like creature and his fortune-telling Gand friend. While Jango looked through the transparent windows of his cockpit, keeping an eye out for any starships that were moving a little too quickly, perhaps an old client with a grudge, he wasn't too distracted to impart fatherly advice to his son. "Because you know them, or know of them, which means you have at least some idea of how they work," he said, amused that he, of all people, was imparting advice. The unknown factor. That's the real reason here. And it was a lesson that Boba would learn by the end of the hunt. After completing their mission, the other bounty hunters betrayed Jango and threatened to kill Boba if he didn't hand over the woman they were contracted to capture. Jango didn't even consider accepting the deal and turned his back on Boba, allowing the Chadrafan to think the Mandalorian had exchanged his only child's life for a bounty, a deadly mistake. Boba quickly withdrew a concealed pistol and killed two of the traitors and allowed the third one to flee, since he didn't seem to be in on the betrayal, and so that the legend of Boba Fett could start to fill cantinas across the Inner Rim. But that's a different story for a different time. When it comes to Boba Fett's conversation with his father in the cockpit of Slave One, there's a lot that we can gather about the Fett's relationship with Bane. Again, there isn't much written about the three in historical records besides the obvious. Jango mentored Bane, and Bane mentored Boba. But we've never actually seen much of that mentorship in any of the stories. So when Boba Fett complains about the pathetic bounty hunters on Telarath and suggests working with Cad Bane instead, he's likely making the recommendation because he knows that Bane is one of his father's favorite associates, someone that he could trust. When his father died in the arena of Geonosis, there was only a handful of people that Boba could really turn to, and Cad Bane was one of them. Thanks to Jango's mentorship of the Derosian bounty hunter, they had a good relationship. That being said, Bane always wanted to be the best bounty hunter, and while Jango was alive, that wasn't going to happen. If we take it a step further, it's obvious by the end of the Telarath mission impression that Jango wanted to teach his son a powerful lesson about who to trust in general. After they had secured their bounty, the Fets walked in front of their 3 other partners, and that mistake allowed them to surprise attack them. If they had worked with Cad Bane or Aurra Sing, as Boba would have liked, the boy would have never learned how to prepare himself for treachery, which only adds further evidence to the idea that Bane was one of the few people the Fets could rely on. In the end, it's quite impossible to know exactly what great adventures Cad Bane and the Fets went on together, but in this small conversation aboard the Slave One, the way the pair talk about the Derosian, almost as if he were an uncle-ish figure, reveals much more than enough. And in the Book of Boba Fett, this also makes sense as to why Cad Bane told Boba just before he was gonna terminate him, "This is my final lesson to you," bringing everything in full circle and showing that Cad did indeed have adventures with Boba. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wish there was a little more information about Cad and Boba together, but I guess we'll have to wait for that to happen, maybe in a comic or maybe some more information that I can find. Thanks for watching this video. Catch you all in the next one. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.